So, Vikram, let's start with knowing more about you. What has been your journey so far? Where are you from? Can you talk about those aspects with our audience and let us know
Oh,
more
yeah,
about you?
absolutely. And I'm going to keep it very candid and transparent, unlike what I may have done previously on any of a similar show. So, Prashant, I come from a very, very, very rural background, right? Like, I come from North India, Bihar, like the state Bihar, where there's a city called Sitamarhi. It's as
Oh,
remote as it gets, like, just to probably draw a parallel. I guess up until 2005, 2006, we still had like roughly 18, 20 hours of power cuts back at our home, right? Like my childhood was working with lanterns. We of course, like everybody in my family was a doctor, so we were very well positioned as far as education and activeness towards like, hey, let's step out of the city and do and explore what's out there goes. But still, I resided there, and it has a lot of impact and influence on you because 100 meters north of my house, you would walk into homes where people were really struggling to make their ends meet, right? Like you don't have enough food on the plate at the end of the day.
correct. I've been to Darbhanga. Some of my best friends are from Bihar. I've been to Darbhanga, I've been
That-
to Patna. So, but
yeah.
that has been more of recent past, recently than what you're saying. So, yeah, yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Now a lot of things have changed. In fact, Darbhanga and Patna both happen to be the nearest two airports. So anyway, so Prashant, coming back to my background, I grew up in Bihar. Things flow down smoothly, but given our proactiveness towards like, hey, let's get the best education out there, I stepped out in very early days. I think it's been almost 18 years, 19 years for me since I stepped out of my hometown, and I am like 27 years old. So you stepped out at a very young age. My upbringing was in a Gurukul in its truest sense, where you really have monks. We were as a part of this mission, like this group called Ramakrishna Mission, right? Like, and it happened. Because Ramakrishna Mission is somewhere where there is a lot of really, really, really good students. Like to give you a context, some 25,000, 30,000 students at 80 people or so get in. It gets pretty competitive, so everyone has their eyes on the best institutes in India, and that's how I ended up going the JE preparation route, landed into IIT Guwahati. In IIT Guwahati,
By
I
the way,
ended
I'm from
up.
Guwahati also. So, we have
Oh,
another common
brilliant.
connection that way.
Brilliant. Beautiful city, no doubt
Yeah.
about that. Specifically North Guwahati, it's lovely. So anyways, at IIT Guwahati now, that brings me to my professional setup, right? Like, so I have a product and design background. That is what I graduated with from IIT Guwahati. I think this was 2013 to 2017, and in 2015 is where I got first time introduced to crypto. I want that to come in now because crypto is going to be very central to our talk henceforth. And from then, there was no looking back. So I graduated, I joined this company called Sprinkler, and I initially just wanted to like try what working for a early stage or a mid stage startup was. Sprinkler had a reputation of being the best startup out there back then in 2017, 2018. I remember people left their jobs at Google, Microsoft to pick Sprinkler, and that always stood out for me. So when I got an opportunity, I was like, oh, this is a blessing. Let's see what the culture at Sprinkler is like. You get in, and it was around $1 billion back then, valued at $1 billion roughly. And the company is based out of New York. Like it's headquartered in New York. The founder is of Indian origin, Raji Thomas. And it deals with social media management, right? Like social media management, customer experience management. So you can imagine any insight that you want taken care of from what people are talking about. If you are as a brand, let's say you are Nike and you want to know what people are talking about shoes, what are their interests, what cars are they driving, when are they active, are they using TikTok, are they using Instagram, what are they even really consuming, what should someone say? Like if the MetaRoy podcast wanted to reach out to everyone who's using Nike products, what would be the best way for you to position yourself? And from there, like today, you buy products on social media, right? Like, so there is a commerce angle that comes on
Exactly.
it, which is a massive industry. You have customer care. You do not go in and call the call center. You go onto Twitter and say, hey, AT&T or Airtel, your service is pretty bad. I'm having this issue, right? Like, so you expect it to getting for it to get resolved if you go in and rant about it publicly. And this is what Sprinkler was after.
Correct. I think I used Sprinkler back into 2017 itself as part of my agency's work with Diageo. So They were
Oh yeah,
managing the entire
Diageo as a client.
Diageo line, and that's how I used Sprinkler at that point.
Diageo as a client, I have gone to London to like oversee some of Diageo's projects back then as well. And anyway, that like those 4 years, they were super packed with a lot of new explorations, right? Like, so I think
Right,
in over 4 years, we ended up in my personal capacity and with the help of my team. I joined in a team which was 3, 4 members strong. By the time I graduated, we were some 43, 44 people across 4 continents, right? Like in my personal org. I joined in as a fresher. By the time I walked out, I was a senior director of product design and growth. And like to some extent, while all of this was happening, we were churning out products one after the other, right? Like so very, very fast paced environment. I think we built some 64 plus products that have a revenue of 1 million at least, which means you maybe developed 100 or more, out of which half didn't work, right? Like and it just like spells growth. You're growing left, right, and center. You're always doing things you never expected to. As a fresher, I was sent to Brazil to oversee the product merger of this company that we had acquired in Brazil. And I was like, okay, I have never done this in the past. I'm a designer for all it's worth. And then from there, like you see, so you start managing products, you start having people under you, and it was just like highly, highly meritocratic, is what I would say. But in the backdrop of all of this, there was my crypto story bulging up, right? Like, so 2015, I got into Bitcoin. You never really stop once you have really understood the tech because there is a lot happening. So you keep running into things like, oh, there's something called Ethereum now in the market. Oh, there's a hack that has happened. Hey, prices are really going up. Back in 2015, when I saw Bitcoin was, I guess, some $200. By the time I was earning money, by the time I got my first salary, I saw that, oh, Bitcoin had probably gone to something around $4,000, $5,000, and it was just going up and up. And I was like, wow, I was an idiot to not invest into it. So I'm just going to put all of my money into crypto. And for the first 4 or 5 months, everything that I was earning just went into crypto. I was like surviving on the bare means, bare minimum. I like, okay, I'll probably only take a walk, not take this auto. Let's save that 100 rupees and put it in crypto because I was very hungry to catch on that growth that crypto was having, right? Like, and it led to some beautiful things because as you're really trying to chase what is to be invested in to understand, because I understood Bitcoin, I was not really blindly putting money into project. And when you're trying to understand what a project does, you run into really, really interesting projects. So I ran into this thing called CryptoKitties. And I remember sitting in my office and joking about it. I was also a big proponent of crypto at Sprinkler. I was like getting people left, right, and center. Oh, hey, you will regret this. I'm telling you, please get in. But essentially, what ended up happening was I got into CryptoKitties. It was like funny because you were breeding cats and kittens, and like it just felt like a game. And I was like, hey, this is so fun. I don't know what's happening in the world of cryptocurrency. And jokingly, I think I interacted with over 100, 120 CryptoKitties at one point in time. I wish I had not let them go because I had
and this
no
is
clue
before
they would.
NFTs were a thing, right?
And that is probably the genesis of NFT as far as I see, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
so life would have been very different if I would have like kept all of it, but it was for fun. 2017 crash happened. I survived pretty well because I was like diversifying. I had my assets at the right place. But essentially, I realized that, okay, it's too volatile for me to understand. So let's keep understanding the tech a little bit more. And that is where Polygon and all started coming up. There were proposals being floated. I had dismissed DAOs as a fact in 2018 because someone was saying, hey, we'll replace governments. And I was like, okay, that's too aspirational, not really going to happen. Right. Like, and Polygon came up. India was like getting very harsh on crypto. Companies were shutting down. The company I had invested through CoinX, it doesn't exist anymore. And they went through that phase where the government said it's illegal. So a whole bunch of stuff was happening. I continued working at Sprinkler, but of course, I was very well aware of what's happening. Like DeFi gained heat in 2020, but in 2019, 2018 as well, there were mentions of some experiments. They were not still using the term DeFi. Web3 was a term that was not being used back then. But essentially, blockchain, what it can do, I was like too really, really engrossed into it. So when I left Sprinkler, and this was right before Sprinkler's IPO, Sprinkler was gonna go. I wanted to pursue some things around growth. Sprinkler was filing for an IPO, so of course you don't really want to experiment a lot when you're trying to go public. And I was like, okay, I'll step out and try these things that I've run into, which was around product growth. And I think I took a detour. I took a break from Sprinkler and I went on like a month long, like sort of random journey across India. And I was just talking to each and every founder I could. So the goal was, hey, it looks like in 4 years we have spent 40 years in the industry at Sprinkler. But is that all a bubble, or am I really like onto something here? Do I really have some maturity or some understanding which may be good for like establishing a business? And by then I had some ideas that okay, probably I'm gonna start something of my own, because when you are doing so many projects one after the other, you realize that a lot of times you're just thinking from scratch. And if you're thinking from scratch, you can pretty much like have higher rewards, and then you start questioning some things around why are we even doing it. So all of that had happened the way it happens with every single employee in the world. And that on top of me going on that 1 month long trip, I think I met around 60, 70 founders. I don't recollect the exact number. It was pretty much around 60. I have it actually documented somewhere on my LinkedIn. But it was more like, hey, breakfast with someone else, lunch with someone else, dinner with someone else. I was flying into all the big cities like Delhi, Mumbai, Pune. I flew to Bangalore. I was taking a break in midway. So I went to Pondicherry for a short while. Then again came to Coimbatore, where there is a lot of tech companies coming up. Then I went to this Isha Yoga Center and then to Uti. Then again I went on like a detour and went to this place called Mulki for sea surfing. Then again came back to the city of Pune. A whole bunch of stuff was happening, right? Like, and then I realized that people who had started out as entrepreneurs in my batch, they had certain learnings. People who had built companies, somewhere like very seasoned CEOs. I don't really want to name anyone here because we don't want to get into the specifics, but some people were very established CEOs. They had their own views. And to a large extent, I was like, okay, I am not really too far away from whatever they have learned in whatever number of years they have invested in their industry. So like I want to really work for some super early stage company, because Sprinkler was still $1 billion when I got in. It was 5 billion, 4.5 billion when it did its IPO. So that was a different exposure. There were still engines in place. And in the course of it, I ended up meeting someone from my own college, Mrigang. Of course, when you meet founders and they get that pulse on you, like jobs start flowing in left, right, and center. I think I ended up getting some 50 plus job offers from here and there. And I was like, okay, this is too overwhelming, but I really want to do something very, very, very early stage where I have freedom. So growth was on my mind ever since I left Sprinkler. And I was like, hey, Mrigang happened to be an IIT Guwahati alum. He was doing something which was supremely interesting, at least on the outset, right? Like he was doing crypto forensics. Now, crypto forensics for people is like, hey, there's a scam. Someone comes and takes away your Bitcoin. What are you really going to do? You go complain to FBI, you go complain to whoever, your local police. What are they going to do? How are they going to trace where the funds went? And then the second thing is, how do I really protect you from not interacting with someone who may be trying to scam you, right? Like someone who may be trying to do rug pull. So you are talking like sitting in rooms with the likes of folks like Kraken, Coinbase, Bank of America, right? Like Hong Kong Police Force, FBI. And the very idea seems very interesting. It's like, oh, wow, I am talking to criminals on a day to day basis. So I joined Merkle Science as the AVP of product. Very interesting phase again, because the company was in Singapore. They were trying to have the positioning US first. We were establishing the sales function, the marketing function. The very first few people were getting hired. The mission and vision were also getting defined. So it was a brilliant time for me to get in. And that is where, of course, I was professionally back into the crypto sector. So once you are professionally back into the crypto sector, everything that had been happening in the backdrop since Sprinkler's time suddenly comes to fruition. And that's it. There was no looking back. So I was like, okay, now there is suddenly a lot of maturity. 2018 DAOs were out of the way. Now suddenly DAOs had become big. They were becoming mature. They were talking about making money. It was not really looking like it's a bunch of millennials just trying to like play around with money, right? Like it's not trying to do stupid stuff. And I was like, oh wow, DeFi had shown itself a lot. There were scams happening in DeFi. Given I was in Merkle, we were of course in the middle of all of that as well. And a typical day at Merkle Science would look like someone from Italy messaged us. I remember this lady who was 45 years old. She went and said, hey, I was dating this guy online. He was from Nigeria, and he was almost spending like 4 to 5 hours with her virtually every day. They fell in love. They decided they would get married. She was 45, he was a little young. And he says that, okay, I'll move because Nigeria is not a place where you want to come in. Italy is a better place. I'm going to move in, but my currency is devalued. So I need you to help me relocate. And she ends up spending all of her net worth, everything, because I don't know how that happened exactly, but long story short, she ended up transferring everything she had in the form of Bitcoin to him, and he disappeared after 9 months of dating, right? Like, and never to be found again. So she's like frustrated. This was like a day-to-day activity at Merkel Science. We would wake up reading a message from someone saying, "This has happened. Can you please help me?" So we were right in the center of everything, and that kept on and on, and then COVID happened. So I was really sick. Now when I say really sick, I developed some post COVID complications. This was the Delta variant, and because of some post COVID complications, I was pretty much in that stage where I was not able to move. Like, I had to be very cautious in how I was getting up, otherwise there was excruciating pain in my chest and so on. In that process, I was like, okay, I'm anyway lying on the bed. What do I do? I'm very bored. I can't work because you're not able to focus. With COVID, there is also some cloudiness. You time and again blur out. So you're like, okay, let's take it slow. So it's like, I'm not working, but I can talk to people. So I started pinging anyone and everyone who's building in Web3. Like, literally going onto Twitter, typing DAO, Web3, crypto, seeing a bio shop surface up, cold messaging that person, 10%, 20%, 30% hit rate. Like, people in crypto still engage with random messages. And I was like, why are you building? Someone was building MetaMask on Terra back then. And I was like, why? What do you see you're going to do with it? Right? Like, some developer who was saying, hey, Postman is a big company in Web 2. It is about APIs. Like, you can try a whole bunch of things. And it's brilliant. Developers love it, but product managers also love it. But then in Web3, you do not have an equivalent of it. And we are talking like billions of dollars here, because Web3, if it picks up, and which it will, as far as the signals say, there will be a need of a company like that, right? Like, so how do you go about solving for what developers use today is a tool called Tenderly. So basically, why are people building in Metaverse? What's with the NFT? Why is everyone going and launching an NFT? How many projects have a depth? And I think the we ran into some 7 8 verticals. Now when I say we, I became we here because Apurv, who was my batchmate, Apurv Nandan, he's a mathematics and computing graduate from IIT Guwahati as well, and we are friends from like almost 9 10 years now. There's a very different chemistry, right? Like, so he was at Observe AI in the role of a founding engineer. Prior to that, he was leading the voice intelligence team at Samsung, Bixby division, right? Like, so he was all into AI, machine learning. And I was like, Apurv, I know you have also been in the crypto space because we had shared chats in the past. And I don't know how much you've thought about building it, but here are a bunch of ideas, right? Like, so he was like, oh, I'm already trying to build something on Shopify. Do you want to like explore that route as well? I was like, sure. I'm anyway bored, so let's try a few things. And that's where we started doing something for Shopify. But because the topic and our minds were really fixated on crypto, Web3, and it looked like this is too big of an opportunity to miss, I have never mentioned it before, but what we really set out to build on Shopify had really garnered traction. There were at least 7 8 big D2C brands in India who had committed to paying us. And we said, like, hey, you know what, we can build this any day. Like, what we are really trying to build here, it can be built a year later as well, and it would still be relevant. And if someone else builds it, you'll still have scope of improvement, because it was a massive project that we had taken up. But Web3, it looks like it's too significant to let go. So Apoorv also joins me on the journey of like cold messaging people. I think we speak to some 400 or so people. We identify 7 8 verticals which are all going to be relevant. Now the story is Sprinkler, Merkel Science, Apurv's Observe, Samsung Bixby, but for the business division, we're like, hey, we understand B2B and SaaS way better than B2C. I could totally build a dating app today on blockchain. I don't know how to distribute it. I don't feel comfortable. I can figure it out, but I don't think that's my forte. So, with that in the backdrop, we were like, okay, let's figure out something which is under the hood, because we don't want the tool to be in the eyes of people. Like, that's brilliant if you can do something which is just powering technology. So, infrastructure, think operating systems, and then pick a sector which is going to be relevant. My dad always used to say, hey, he was a good student and he chose pathology, which was pretty hot back then. And there were people who chose radiology and so on. And he was like, radiology was not really that big back then. But today, in retrospect, that was a brilliant decision, because look at how the number of scans have increased. And they chose something which places them as one of the top doctors in the country today. And he was like, always pick something that's going to be relevant 5 years, 10 years down the line. Because when you are 35, when you're 40, you don't want to be stuck in an industry which you do not think is going to be the top industry in the world at that point in time. With that in the backdrop, crypto happened, Web3 happened. We realized out of the 400 people we talked to, almost 80% of them said, hey, we don't know if we'll call it a DAO, but we are going to go the community first route of building a product. And that is where I was like, okay, if this is what it's coming to, corporates, like even if 50% of corporates convert to DAO in the ideal world, or maybe 100% of them do in like 50 years, it's already too big, but it's not going to stop there. Like there are these communities which are there for fundraising, welfare, everything can be positioned into a DAO and everything is going to be a super business, right? Like, so how do you leverage all of that? And that is how DaoLens was born. So it started with conversations with a bunch of people. When you start diving deeper into DAOs, you realize, oh wow, there are a whole bunch of problems. Like you spend 2 days in a DAO and you will be able to identify 50 problems that need some solution. The sad part is that it's so tricky solving for them because DAOs operate in a weird way. And that is where it's like it seems that the problem is easy to discover, but finding a solution that will really stick with time is going to be tricky for you. And that's a very long and elaborate introduction into what my background has been, how DaoLens was born, who my co-founder is. But yeah, back to you, Prashant.